Welcome in. Yeah, me or you? The
Huh?
beep. That
Oh,
loud beep.
I don't think it was me.
Whatever. Good intro. Welcome in. Hail to the podcast. Brought to you by Maize and Blue Review. We cover Michigan for the Rivals Network, which means you can find us at michigan.rivals.com. Here, obviously, to talk about the Arkansas State win for Michigan on Saturday. And I think we have some answers at some spots, probably more questions at other spots. And then obviously the game itself is probably less important than quarterback, the health of Colston Loveland, and obviously what Michigan does next as USC is coming to the Big House next week. Big Ten schedule is here. And I think it's fair to say the fan base still has anxiety and still has some concerns about this team. So we're going to jump right into it. I am joined today by Mr. Brock Heilig, again, our guy in the sky who attends every Michigan game. Josh will not be with us. He is sick again. He assured us he will be back next week, though. But yeah, he's had a pretty rough illness, so we'll see him soon. But anyway, yes, Brock, how was your day in Ann Arbor watching Michigan, Arkansas State?
It was good. I think any day in Ann Arbor is a good day, but it was I can't lie, it was nothing like last week against Texas. The atmosphere just wasn't quite at that level as it was for the Wolverines and the Longhorns, but it was good. The game was good. It's always good to be in Michigan Stadium, but yeah, like you alluded to, a lot of stuff to talk about in terms of coaching, depth chart, things like that. So a lot to get into.
It's still coaching for me. Look, I took away some positives, especially in the first half. I think a lot of the negatives or concerns we'll talk about in regards to the second half can be chalked up to it being second half and maybe how Michigan handled it. We'll get into it. But yeah, just still like, oh, what are we doing? These moments, like, I still don't understand things, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about one, though. I think we're right back to square one where we were in March. We're talking about the quarterback at the start of the Big Ten schedule. One of the most bizarre passing lines I think I've ever seen. Davis was 11 of 14, 78% completion, 122 yards. Obviously not a lot of yards, but that's 8.7 per attempt. I mean, that's not far off from some of the games where JJ and Cade really didn't get used much. And we were like, all right, I'd like to see him throw it more, but fine, right? Only problem, those 3 incompletions were all interceptions. I think, the one where his arm got hit, it looked worse on the replay than it did live to me, but I'm still like, maybe you shouldn't have thrown it there. It just feels like there's no in between with him right now because he is hitting some of these out throws and some of these routes that are difficult throws, and he's doing a good job when he escapes from the pocket, not getting sacked and making some plays. You can't have 3 interceptions against Arkansas State.
No.
Right. And this coaching staff talked all offseason when we asked about the quarterback and they talked about what went into it. That was the big one, right? Was protecting the football. So Orji does come in. That first drive, I can't remember if it was 6 or 7 times they ran it straight, and then they kind of ran a similar play to get the touchdown where he's all alone. Nobody thinks he's going to throw it, and he throws it.
Yep.
And then they did let him take the one deep shot. I have some thoughts on that. I'll get to that in a second. But because it was late in the game, they didn't really give him the full trial that he probably deserves.
Yep.
And now we go into this week with, again, we're in the same boat. Who's the quarterback?
Yeah, it's like you said, it's really no different than the conversation we were having in March. And Davis Warren clearly not good, right? And you can't sugarcoat it. It was just not a good performance. And listen, I wrote about this after the game. I wrote an article about the quarterbacks and Sharon Moore's comments on him post game. Week 3 last year, JJ McCarthy threw 3 interceptions against Bowling Green. Week 3 this year, Davis Warren threw 3 interceptions against Arkansas State. The difference is JJ McCarthy's performance against Bowling Green was clearly an anomaly. He only threw 1 other interception the entire season.
Right.
Davis Warren's performance yesterday, pretty much a trend at this point. He's thrown at least 1 interception in every game, and he threw 3 against Arkansas State. He just doesn't take care of the football. And that's really what Michigan brought him in to do was to run the offense and to take care of the football. And to be honest, he's really not doing it. And that's why they had to make the switch. And Orji, we haven't seen a whole lot of sample size from him either. He only threw 4 passes. I think he was 2 of 4. But yeah, it's the conversation has really gone nowhere from where it was 6 months ago. And now you're going into Big Ten play against a good USC team that's ranked 11th in the country. And I don't think anyone has any idea who's going to be the starter.
No, my gut instinct initially was, okay, this is Orji's job, right? It just felt like, okay, that's it. And then I thought about it and I'm like, man, they talked so much about not second guessing themselves. Schroen was really defending Davis, which I've defended Davis quite a bit as well, because I think he is better than people say. Right. And I've said my biggest issue is all the other issues on the offense. I just didn't want to have this conversation where it's like, oh, we switched the quarterback and everything's fixed. I'm more concerned about the offensive line, the formations, the play calling, the lack of receivers separate. Like, he was just so low on my list of concerns before Arkansas State.
Yep.
And I was like, look at some of these numbers and what he's doing. It's really not that bad. I think there's other things. I just didn't want this perception of like, oh, we put Tuttle in, everything's fixed. That was my thing. What really changed in this game is, look, I've said Michigan needs to do more to help protect him because he was facing too much pressure. And and we saw that with Orji too, on that 1 3rd down play later in the game. You go empty set on 3rd and 4. What are you doing?
Yeah.
I don't get it. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. But Davis only faced 5 pressures in this game. He had 10 just from Evan Lake in the last one, right? Only 5 pressures in this game. Listen to this stat line. 0 for 2. 2 interceptions. So the 2 balls he did throw under pressure were picked. He was sacked twice and he scrambled for, I think, a yard or something on the other one. I mean, right. And Vince says at the turnovers, right? That was the biggest thing. Like, if he goes out there and he throws 1 a game, I'm like, it's still not great, but whatever. But 3, it's like, at this point, we talked about when we thought they were going to play a 2 QB system. Like, where does the cutoff in terms of risk and benefit for our Orji come in? At this point, if he's turning it over anyway, then what's the point?
Right.
Let Alex Orji try, because if he turns it over, you're in the same boat, right? At least maybe you add something with his ability to run the football. There's throws I don't think he can make. I don't think he can make those out throws. And some of those throws Davis was throwing. But if he can come in and they just be like what Alabama did with Milroe, do the short dink and dunk stuff, take the deep shot occasionally. But again, if Davis isn't protecting the ball, I don't know what the argument is to not give Alex Orji a shot at this point.
Right. That was his calling card going into the season, was he was going to be like Cade McNamara. He wasn't going to be great. He was just going to be average, if you want to call it average, or a game manager, whatever you want to call it. He was going to be that and take care of the ball. And 6 interceptions in 3 games is really not taking care of the ball. And a few of the guys talked about it post game. Like, Donovan Edwards admitted to missing the blitz pickup on the first one and saying that one's not on Warren, that's on me. And you can argue that his I guess his arm did get hit. That's what Schroen said after the game.
Yeah.
So you could argue like pass protection, blitz pickup stuff needs to be better. But I mean, the stat that you just provided, 5 pressures, and he's 0 of 2 with 2 interceptions, 2 sacks, and scrambling for a yard. He's just not. I think the game's a little bit too fast for him when it comes to pressure in the pocket, and sometimes there were a few plays yesterday where he scrambled and showed off his legs a little bit, but to be honest, at this point, I don't see any advantage that he provides you over Alex Orji if Warren's going to keep just turning the ball over.
Yeah, I think there are throws he can make that Orji, or that he can make that Orji probably can't. But again, at the cost of, right? And look, I hear you on the arm hit, and again, I feel like maybe that was thrown to an area even then it shouldn't have been. And I've defended him with some of the pressure stuff. I've defended him with some of the play calling and the rhythm, and that gets into it. But there's also a point where, look, everything's not going to always be perfect for you. Like sometimes a pressure is going to come and you need to overcome that, right? JJ last year, one of his biggest strong suits was the gap between every quarterback's better in a clean pocket. Duh. Right. But the gap between a clean pocket and pressure for JJ was not that severe compared to some other quarterbacks. Yep. Right. Quinn Ewers was a guy going into the Texas game that I was like, look, if you get pressure on him, here's the things that can happen. And he went to another level against Michigan and really handled the pressure well. So at some point, it can't be like, look, until he has a clean pocket every single time, I'm not going to judge him. Right. That's not fair. And look, in this game, part of the reason I was so happy in the first half, and I kept tweeting about this, we saw a lot of 12 personnel. We saw Loveland and Klein. We saw Klein and Bredesen in line. We saw a lot of jumbo, right, with Andrew Gentry on the field as the extra offensive lineman. It looked a lot more like Michigan to me in that first half. And the play calling got a little rhythm going. The running game obviously looked really good, and that opened up the play action and some other throws for Warren. And it was like, okay, they've figured this out. And then I wanted to see them continue to build on that in the second half, and it felt like a combination of having the lead and then obviously Warren throwing the third pick. They were just like, oh, let's get home, which we've seen Michigan do in the past. But that said, just in terms of what I felt after Fresno, in terms of the bizarre formations in Texas, now with Arkansas State, I'm like, look, there was some back to basics here and they saw success from it. These coaches aren't dumb, right? They're going to continue to build off that. That's my hope, at least, in terms of what we're seeing up front with the offensive line. And we might as well bring up Crippen here now too.
Yeah, I figured we were going to get to that. I've got a lot to say about that.
Then let's wait on that. Just in general, how did you feel about the play calling and some of the formations and just how the rhythm of the offense itself looked? Primarily in the first half. Again, I know that things got kind of weird in the second. But
yeah, they did get weird in the second half. But in the first half, I was pretty pleased. They brought out, like you mentioned, Andrew Gentry pretty early and pretty often, if I remember right. I don't recall his exact snap count, but I do remember seeing him running on and off the field quite a bit.
Yep.
And, like you said, we'll get into Crippen later, but they were marching up and down the field. They're in the early second quarter. How many snaps?
14. That's a lot.
14 for Gentry.
That's a lot because he wasn't subbing in for anybody on any of those snaps. So 64 total snaps for Michigan. He was in on 14 of them. That's quite a bit of jumbo.
Yeah, it is. That's about a quarter. Just about a quarter of the plays, almost a little less than a quarter, I guess. But they were marching up and down the field. I mean, the offensive line was looking good. I think that was in the early second quarter when they had those back-to-back drives that resulted in touchdown where Kalel Mullings was running and the offensive line was looking good. But I was pretty pleased. 21 points in the first half. It was solid based on what Michigan has done in other halves this season. So you just got to build off of it. You got to, they clearly entered the game wanting to get back to their identity of running the football. And I think they did that. Like we mentioned, things got strange in the second half with the interceptions and like the third string defense was in or something like that. And they were kind of getting exposed a little bit, but Michigan wanted to get back to its identity of running the football. And it did that. I mean, 301 yards on the ground. That's a good day for Michigan. And they had two drives that looked like perfect Michigan football almost.
Yep. Yeah. The first drive, 11 plays, 76 yards, touchdown, the interception on the next one. And then that third drive, 13 plays, 75 yards, touchdown. The drive after that, touchdown. And then again, another pick. So you wonder without those picks, where things would have gone. You brought up the run game. Let's do the offensive line talk first, because I do think that's going to tie into what I have to say about the running game. You posted, I don't know if you have the stats or if you remember, but Dom is obviously starting, no changes on the offensive line. Crippen comes in, and not only do you see him moving people, that very first run, Donovan goes right on his backside and gets one of his best runs because there's a huge hole there.
Yeah.
Not only did you see him moving people, I thought Preeb and Ohadi next to him also seemed to elevate their play a little bit. And do you have the numbers, what the difference was when Crippen came in?
I do. I don't have numbers for Jadis, but I do have for Crippen. Those two drives that he was in on there in the first half, 17 plays for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns when he was in. And, you know, I'm sure we'll get into a little more of criticism later, but they bring in Jadis to start the second half, which it's baffling. I don't understand really what they're thinking. I mean, Crippen is clearly out there moving guys. He's clearly out there performing well, and yet they're still reverting back to the guy who started the regular season at that position. And I feel like that's not the only position in which they're doing that either. I think there are at least 3 or 4 other positions on the field where they're favoring the guy who won the job coming out of fall camp. And Sharon Moore talks all about how they're evaluating these guys in practice, and whoever's going to practice the best is going to play in the games and things like that. But at a certain point, you got to evaluate what's going on the game field.
That's very pre-2021 vibes to me.
Yeah.
I remember a lot of that talk about, well, at practice, it's like, we're not talking about the difference between like a dude that shows up late to practice every day, isn't running. Like the guy's not a complete bum in practice and thinks he should play, right? This isn't Allen Iverson conversation. You're splitting hairs arguing that one guy looked a little better in practice at this point, right? And it's not a shot. I'm not taking a shot at Dom or anyone else we talk about here, right? And I know coaches see things that we don't at practice and meeting rooms and things like that. But on the offensive line, and I mean, if we want to include Warren in this decision as well, you went against the grain with your decision. We're not arguing we think the backup's better just because, I mean, that's a go-to for fans all the time, right? Well, this guy isn't good to me. The backup must be better. That's not what we're talking about. Greg Crippen was expected to be the starter from the moment the offseason began. You've hyped him up for 2 years. He learned between Olu and Nugent. At right tackle, Andrew Gentry is a former top 100 recruit. He went on a mission trip for 2 years. He's been back in your program for 2 years. He played all over the field in backup duty last year. Him and Percy, who's been in the program for 4 or 5 years and has started a game, like that was your expectation. We didn't even hear Dom's name or Evan Link's name until halfway through fall camp. I think Link I was willing to talk myself into because I'm like, okay, he wasn't a low-rated recruit. He was a higher-ranked recruit. And he's a redshirt freshman, so if he gets up, maybe that's not a bad deal, right? But we expected Crippen. We expected Gentry. We expected Orji because of things the coaches said as well, right? Like this was the expectation. And all 3 of those spots, you went against those expectations. Not only does it not look like it's not working on the field, but those other guys, when they've played, have looked better. So what are we doing?
Yeah. And to add on that point, I don't think it's a coincidence either that those are the 3 positions where you had guys rise up midway through fall camp. And now it's the 3 positions that we're here talking about after week 3 going into Big Ten play that are arguably performing the worst. And I just really don't understand what the coaching staff is seeing. Obviously, like we've talked about, they know way more football than either of us will ever know. But I think a lot of fans and a lot of people that watch these games are curious of what's going on between practice and on the field when you've got guys that no one was even mentioning. Dom Jadis was not hardly even mentioned as a contributor at center until midway a couple weeks into fall camp. It was Crippen and Anderson. And then all of a sudden here comes Dom. And then at right tackle, like you mentioned, it's Gentry and Percy, and all of a sudden Evan Link rises up, and everyone expected it to be Orji, and Davis Warren steps in, and those are 3 pretty glaring weaknesses at this point. So I don't think it's a coincidence. I am curious to see what they do going forward, and I'm curious to if we ever find out what happened between the second half of fall camp and now at those positions.
Yeah, I mean, we know a little bit. I know there was injuries on the offensive line that kind of forced them to move some guys around during fall camp, and that gave Dom an opportunity to play and impress. And then Evan Link was playing as the backup left tackle, and he was impressing so much. They're like, well, we got to get him in the right tackle battle. I get that part of it. But yeah, again, to make up that much ground in a couple of weeks. And Link, to his credit, look, he only allowed one pressure in this game, right? But Arkansas State's not Texas, and they're not USC either, right? So
Yep.
I get maybe thinking Link, I'm a little bit more understanding of, okay, they want to give him a little more time. The Dom and Crippen thing makes absolutely no sense to me, though.
No.
And again, it's not about me knowing more than coaches. We're not judged against each other, right? You're judged against your peers when you're a coach, right?
Yep.
So, and when you're getting out coached like you were against Texas and you're seeing these things, it's like, man, I don't know. I mean, another one of those things, frankly, look, I'm not going to pat ourselves on the back here. We are hardly the only people that said Kalel Mullings probably could be RB1 this year, right? We've been talking about Kalel Mullings getting the ball more and his potential back to last year. A lot of people have, because again, you've watched Kalel Mullings run the football. You've seen him fight for extra yards. You've seen his legs churn. You've seen the vision he has. We've talked about the Haskins comparisons. It was so frustrating. Like, oh my gosh, give him the ball more. What are we doing? Last week, no running back has double-digit carries. And it's like, ugh. Yep. And again, we come into this one and we see more pin and pull. We see more gap running. We see more jumbo and extra protection. We see Max Bredesen allowed to do Max Bredesen things. And we see Kalel Mullings have a career day.
Yep. Yeah. And listen, here's my opinion on this. I understand Michigan wants to go out there and use Donovan Edwards. He's the senior running back. He's the captain, and he's provided this program with some of its best moments in recent history, if not all of its history, right? Those two touchdowns against Ohio State, the 2 touchdowns in the national championship. He's provided this fan base with so many memorable moments. And so I can understand where the staff is wanting to go with that and using him and kind of honoring him in that way, as giving him the RB1 title, if you call it, and putting him out there as the first running back on the field. But that was last year, and that was 2022. Those 2 big games that he had. This is this year, and I think Michigan needs to do its best for this year. And Kalel Mullings is clearly the guy that's going to put his head down and get you, like you've mentioned, 5 yards a carry. And what did he have yesterday? 6, 8? I can't. I have it right here. Actually, let me pull it up. He had 10.2 yards a carry.
Yeah.
And, he's breaking tackles. He's running hard. And I give Edwards credit. He ran hard too yesterday,
yes,
probably harder than I've ever seen him. But there was talk in the press box on Kalel Mullings' first touchdown run, the first touchdown of the game, that 30-yarder. He broke a tackle, like a shoestring tackle, right at the first down line, or at the line of scrimmage. It was right there. It wasn't far down the field. He broke a tackle and ran for a touchdown. There was talk in the press box that perhaps Donovan Edwards may have been tripped up on that play and fallen down, right? And that's the difference between Kalel Mullings and Donovan Edwards right now, I think, is that Kalel Mullings just doesn't go down as easily. And he runs, honestly, harder than Edwards does. And he gets more yards per carry. He may not be faster in terms of straight line speed, but Kalel Mullings is the guy that's going to be the workhorse in the run game.
And I want to be clear. I am not arguing for less Donovan Edwards. I think there should be more Donovan Edwards, just in a different role. Leave him in the lightning role that he was in 22 with Corum. He was supposed to be in 23, but obviously, that didn't go to plan. But 21, Haskins and Corum too, right? Mullings is your clear early down and short yardage back, and Edwards does better feeding off of a back like Kalel Mullings. And look, we have proof of it. After Mullings got his touchdown, Edwards came back in and ran really well. I've got the stats here. Listen to this. As RB1, so I considered RB1 any carries where Edwards started the drive or was getting them like in short yardage where you would consider the RB1 of Michigan, okay? Against Arkansas State, 12 carries, 42 yards, 3.5 yards per carry. RB2 role, that's any drive where he's getting carries after Mullings started the drive, established the run, whatever it might be, or wasn't used in a short yardage situation. Only 5 attempts, 39 yards, 7.8 yards per carry, 1 touchdown. It's just that simple. I don't mind if they both end up with the same number of carries, similar to they did in this one, but I want to see Mullings on the early downs because you're going to need, like we said at the beginning of the year, I don't care if it's Warren or Orji at this point. I need 2nd and 5.
Yep.
I need 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. Right. And even on that 3rd and short that he had where Mullings just jumped over the line. And I'm like, that's something Corum would have done. That's something Haskins would have done. They understand the assignment, get the job done, and move on. Right. And I feel stupid even bringing it up because he's a senior and it hasn't happened yet. You don't have a standout receiver right now. Throw Donovan Edwards the football.
Yeah.
Throw Donovan Edwards the football. Put these two guys on the field at the same time. Especially, I did the thumbnail for this. Path forward. Orji, Mullings, Edwards. That's it. That's your trio in the backfield. You build absolutely everything off of those 3.
Yeah.
And I think that's brought me to this point. I think that's got to be the path forward. I'm not saying I want less Donovan Edwards. I want him used correctly. As the RB2, as the guy that comes in after Mullings has already worn dudes down, already has them thinking, because guess what? They both had 4 missed tackles forced in this game. Right? To your point, he looked like he was running harder. This was not a bad day for Donovan Edwards. It's not. Yeah. Just like Penn State in 21 or 22? It would have been 22 when Corum and Edwards both went off.
Yeah.
Right? That can happen. He's not the first guy that should be getting the carries. And that's fine. Who cares? I saw Alvin Kamara going off for the Saints today, and I just couldn't help but think, that's what Donovan Edwards should be. A play action screen. Kamara has full open field to get up to speed. Because Edwards isn't quick. He's fast.
Yep.
Right? So once he gets up to speed, but you got to give him that leg, give him that room. So for me, as far as the offense goes, I like what I've seen with the formations. I think Crippen's got to be the guy. I'll give you some time on right tackle. We'll talk about wide receivers next. But, man, go big up front. Give it to Orji. Let's run some option. Make Mullings RB1, Edwards RB2, and throw him the damn ball.
Yeah. Well, what's fascinating is I think that backfield of Orji, Mullings, and Edwards would work. If you get that running game going, and like you mentioned, wear the defense down with Mullings, use Donovan Edwards in that lightning role, keep the defense honest with a pass here or there, take a shot here or there. It could work. I'm not saying they're going to go out there and use that offense and beat USC and run the table or anything like that, but that could be a good offense. If you run it
match
with
this defense well.
Yeah. Yeah, if you run it with Orji and Mullings and Edwards, wear down the defense, keep the opposing defense on the field, win the time of possession like Michigan's done frequently over the last 3 years, it could work. And it seems like that Maryland game in 2021, when Donovan Edwards went off as a freshman for, 10 receptions for 170 yards and a touchdown or something like that?
Crazy like that, yeah.
That game feels like an eternity ago. They haven't used him in that role in forever.
The one Purdue deep shot they took last year with him.
Yeah, exactly. I think it could be successful. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, and I bring up the receivers. People are starting to talk about the blocking. Yeah, CJ Charleston got a lot more. Look, the rotations are still weird here. Let's talk about this. But CJ Charleston got a lot more run in this game because of the Tyler Morris injury. No targets, though, but he had 2 huge blocks, one on the Mullings TD and then another long Mullings run, I believe. He specifically was called out for having great blocks. Here's my frustration with the receivers. Kendrick Bell, again, we've brought this up. He's arguably wide receiver 1 at this point. He played 31 snaps in this game, more than Samaj Morgan. Charleston played the most at 35. Those two together, Charleston and Bell, right? That's, what did I just say? 66 snaps, 0 targets between the 2 receivers.
Yeah.
Right. So I get the don't block, no rock, that whole thing. I get that. But at some point, again, the thing I was saying with defending Warren to a point, we got to have receivers out there that can get open and catch the ball, right? Fred Moore, the separation on the deep ball, I said we were going to talk about it. I didn't get super upset about that because that has been a problem for Michigan for years.
Yep.
The quarterback and the wide receiver not clicking on a deep ball. I know exactly what happened. Fred Moore had so much separation. He was worried the ball was going to get underthrown.
Yeah.
And he slowed up a little bit. And Orji did what JJ used to always do, which was try to hit him in stride, even though he just had to get it to him in a zone because he was that open.
Yep.
And again, not being on the same page, they missed the deep ball. I did not see that as an indictment of Moore or Orji. For me, that's either Bellamy or I don't know. It's somebody because it's been a problem for years where they just can't link up on this deep ball. But anyway, Bell getting all these snaps. O'Leary, 27 snaps. Even Fred Moore, who looked like he was having a breakout game of sorts. I think he was the 4th highest rated player in the game. Only 25 snaps. I still don't understand what is happening there. And this probably goes back to the in practice thing, I guess. I don't know. And they're still not using Samaj correctly either. And I don't know what to think about the wide receivers at this point.
I don't either. And it's very odd to me. You said Kendrick Bell is probably wide receiver 1 at this point, and he had no I don't even think he had a target. I know he had no catches. I don't think he had a target. No. And the receiving core is just completely depleted. On Tuesday, I asked Kendrick Bell, I asked him if he had expected to see this many snaps this early in the season. I think he had 40 in week 1 or 30 in week 1 and almost 40 in week 2. And then what did you say he had yesterday? 31?
31.
31. I asked him on Tuesday if he expected to be seeing that many snaps this early in the season as a true sophomore that not too long ago transferred over from quarterback.
Right.
And he said he was surprised. And I'm sitting there thinking, how bad can this wide receiver room be if you have a guy who is playing like half the snaps and he is surprised to be playing half the snaps? And he hasn't even been a wide receiver his entire career.
He's got 3 targets, 2 receptions, 18 yards on the season.
Right. I mean, it's really unbelievable. And you're right. They're not using Samaj Morgan correctly. It doesn't help that Tyler Morris is hurt and didn't play yesterday. It's a depleted room. And if Colston Loveland is out for any extended period of time, you might as well run the wishbone or something.
Somebody said the Army playbook.
Yeah, turn into Army. I mean, you're not going to be able to throw the football if you don't have Colston Loveland or Tyler Morris, and the other receivers just don't get open, and there will be no passing game.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, I've said all year. That's why I don't understand. I would be perfectly fine with 2 or 3 tight ends on the field at all times because Loveland can be a receiver. We saw Klein finally get some run, and he showed that he can be a receiving threat. So if they're on the field and you've got Morris and Morgan, fine, you can work with that, right? But again, I don't have the clips now, but we've talked about some of the route tree stuff with receivers. It's bizarre. On Loveland, I didn't hear anything today. Neither did Josh. Typically, I would say no news is good news in that situation. That said, we'll find out more soon. He was on the sideline with no sling, nothing. If it was a serious shoulder injury, there's no way they would have been letting him walk around free. It looked like he mouthed on good to somebody at some point. So we don't know yet. It feels like it's trending positively because of the void of info. Usually when it's bad, we find out pretty quick. We don't like reporting. Like, I don't like chasing clicks with injuries. We've just never been that way, but yeah, we'll see. I don't want to hear about Carmelo English having a big game at wherever he ended up, but yeah.
Giles Jackson too.
Yeah. But again, those guys, it's less them and like the program they go to. And that's why, like, it's hard you have to, at some point, his fault or not, again, the way the coaching is for me, Bellamy at some point, it's like, dude, even when you've recruited well, is, and look, Marsh right now is committed and hopefully signs. And that's kind of the next, like, okay, you got this big star, but like Clemens is the one that I always think about, was the dude you needed, and just nothing. We're never able to get anything out of him. So it's like, again, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse there when it comes to the receivers, but something, regardless of what they do at quarterback, something's got to happen there. Not the benefit, but assuming Loveland's healthy and he's coming back, again, nice to see Klein finally get some of the run and back up the legitimate hype he was getting this summer and fall. Hogan Hansen getting a touchdown, not on my bingo card, but nice to see. We talked about how deep that tight end room is.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, I mean, that's a spot that going to the future of just who they have already, who they're getting, like that room's going to be good. Use it.
Yep.
That's your strength right now. Just lean on the tight ends, lean on Donovan Edwards as a receiving option. If you don't think you have the guys at wide receiver, don't rotate 6 of them, right? Don't play Kendrick Bell, however many, 30 snaps and he doesn't get any targets. Either you don't trust him enough to throw him the ball or he's not getting open. Either problem isn't a good one.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see. Any final thoughts on offense before we move to defense?
Well, to add on tight ends really quick, I wanted to talk a little bit about it. Something I noticed yesterday. I'm almost 100% certain that Marlon Klein was out there on the first play of the game and Colston Loveland was not. I'd have to go back and watch the film to be 100% certain, but I'm pretty sure that
you are correct. Marlon Klein was credited with a start and Loveland was not.
Yeah, which that's something else. That's a completely other topic that baffles me too. But just some of the some of the decisions by this coaching staff, I think, are just so strange. Like, why is the best tight end in college football not on the field for the first play of the game? It doesn't make any sense to me. I know Marlon Klein, they've hyped him up all offseason, all fall camp. They said he might be one of the faster players on the team, totally incredibly athletic, things like that. But I mean, put your best players on the field. It's that simple. I don't know.
Yeah. He was three targets, 3 receptions, 43 yards. Nothing wrong with that. That's exactly what I'd like to see from him. It was weird. Loveland didn't have a ton of snaps, so I can't pull too much from this, but he didn't take a single snap out wide in this game either, which I thought was kind of interesting. So I like the direction they went in the second half, though. Again, we saw some of that empty set. We saw what felt like an abandoning of their run game. There's still, I've just got concerns with what Kirk's doing with the offense.
Yeah.
So tis. I think I was probably way more concerned. I mean, borderline losing my mind with Wink last week. I could not believe. I mean, everybody's concern about him. It was the exact opposite in that game. If anything, he wasn't blitzing enough. They were playing too much zone. Mason Graham took 14 snaps as an edge defender in that game. They come out in this game. They're in base set. They're in nickel for like the entire drive. Yep. They still give up a few third downs, got bailed out by a missed field goal again. But you know what? Okay. I can live with this. Guys are in the positions they need to be in. There's still a lot of rotation. TJ Guy played a lot in this game. Cam Brandt did as well. Still a lot of rotation, but it felt more fluid, like it was a couple plays, right? Mason Graham wasn't on the sideline for an entire series in this game. It was like they were giving him a breather and then the guy coming back in. On third down, they were out there, right? There were times against Texas where I'm like, there's 6 backups on the field on a 3rd and 5. What are you doing, right?
Yeah.
So really back to basics on the defensive side of the ball. And I thought we saw some positives. I thought the front looked more like I would expect the defensive front. I mean, it's still not the pressures and sacks you'd like to see, but it looked – they're still not running a ton of stunts or twists either. The linebackers – biggest leap from last week to this week. Linebackers looked so much more comfortable doing what they were kind of expected to do, I think, right? Which was staying in the box, filling running lanes, dropping into coverage occasionally, but not all the damn time like they did last week, or just being put into zones where they're like looking around and don't know what they're doing.
Yep.
Look, the end of the game, the 3rd and 4th stringers, ugly, right? That was ugly, and it's not something you like to see. But we know this defense isn't as deep as it's been in years past. Like we know that. I'm more concerned about maybe the mentality, right? And that goes to some of the dumb penalties and some other stuff that we saw too, where it's like, you know, but in terms of the defense, I was a lot happier in this game. They didn't give up a first down, after the first drive through the rest of the second half or something crazy like that.
Yeah, they went a long way. While you pull that up, they went a long way.
So the last drive of the second half, yeah. So they went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight drives, not giving up a first down.
Yeah, pretty dominant, and it was good to see them get back to the basics. Obviously, the score, a 10-point game, 28-18, not exactly what you want to see at the end of the day, but the starting defense gave up essentially 3 points, and that's a win, right? You got to take any wins you can get, and that's a win. And you brought up some of the uncharacteristic penalties. You got Quentin Johnson with a late hit out of bounds on the first drive of the game. I can't recall any other ones off the top of my head, but I mean, that's a 6th-year senior just making a dumb penalty. I think it was on 3rd down. It would have been 4th.
They gave him a first down. Yeah.
Yeah. And you got a 6th-year senior doing that. I don't know. They do look pretty undisciplined. Maybe if you can remember any, say them, but I don't remember any other like personal fouls, but they did commit quite a few penalties, if I remember right. I think was there a hands to the face penalty at one point?
That shouldn't have been called.
I didn't see the replay on that one.
Oh, it was bad. He was under his shoulder pad, but like they kind of hypothesized on TV, the combination of white glove, white jersey, white helmet, but he was pushing up on his shoulder pad. So that one was like, ugh. But yeah, somebody brought up false starts. I remember the game last week that on 1st and 10, you get the false starts. Like, what are you doing? But I think what you just said, not just penalties, but what you just said, the undisciplined, right? There were so many missed tackles. Last week, which this team is what Michigan did in this 3-year run, and even in their national championship year that people didn't understand was they were just really good fundamentally. They were just so good at the most basic things in football. A lot of these college teams recruit talent and they just want the best athletes and they'll deal with the stupid stuff. They're not even necessarily coaching dudes up. They're just trying to recruit as much talent as they possibly can. And it was like Michigan came out and it was boring, but they didn't get penalties. They didn't turn the ball over. They tackled really soundly. They just did all the basic stuff really well. Your middle school basketball coach just focusing on all the, the basic stuff. They were really good at that. And that is frankly the culture and the continuity that we talk about and why I think there is so much pressure on this staff. We said at the beginning of the year, Brock, 10-2, 9-3, 8-4, like talking about the record. I said how they lose, how they look in these games is going to matter so much more. And that's why people are freaking out right now. It's how they look, the mistakes they're making.
Listen, if I told all the fans that are watching right now that if I told them a month ago that Michigan would be 2-1 and they beat Fresno State by 40, they beat Arkansas State by 35, and they lost to Texas by 3.
Right.
I think a lot of people would be thrilled. Like, hey, Michigan's 2-1, but they looked really, really solid. But at this point in time, Michigan's 2-1, and they've looked pretty poor. Undisciplined football. Not a good offense, not like we talked about, not good quarterback play, things like that. But going back to the undisciplined play, that was something that Michigan really hung its hat on the last 3 years. I can't remember hardly any, undisciplined penalties from last year. I know Makari Page had one in the national championship. I think that one right along the Washington sideline where I think the Washington coaches and players kind of baited the ref into making that call. But that's what Michigan had success doing, was playing sound defense and just like Joel Klatt said, being the boa constrictor, not beating themselves, just taking the life out of the other team. And it's pretty crazy to see how in the span of 9 months, obviously we can talk all we want about how Michigan lost all these guys to the draft, things like that. You got new, kind of younger, unexperienced guys coming in, but I don't think anyone really expected the identity in terms of defense and just playing good disciplined football. I don't think anyone expected that to drop as much as it has. It is pretty concerning, honestly.
I'll tell you who didn't. This coaching staff. And this is where my concern comes from, because we've already spent a lot of time with the offense kind of talking about, okay, if this was your personnel decision, how did you get there? What was your process? If you were wrong, can you admit you were wrong, and how you were wrong, how you got there, right? Like, that's a big thing, is choosing the right guys, understanding your roster. So tell me about that. The scheme and the game planning and the lack of adjustments, especially against Texas. We're like, what was your thought there? Yeah. Right. And also too, look, when we do our off-season reports and stuff, like, I try to say what my opinion is, and I try to say what is based on things I've heard. And when I say heard, it's not just random, right? Like, it's from players, it's from former players, it's from practice observers, it's from coaches directly, right? Stuff that maybe they don't want their name attached to, right? And then it's also what the coaches and players say out loud at all of these media availabilities. That's where this stuff comes from, right? So if you thought this defense was arguably better than last year's, and maybe the best in this 4-year stretch, which was not a single person, there's a lot of people expressing that opinion.
Yep.
Why did you think that?
Yeah.
If you thought you had depth at positions we haven't seen, why did you think that? Why are you telling me things about Enoeta that I believe? Because I do think Enoeta can be really good, but then you're not playing him, right? And that's why, again, I still really struggle to get after players here, because it's like, I don't know that you've been put in the best position. And somebody looked at, the Jair Hill, Amir Hall situation. Hill was given the starting job before fall camp even began.
Yep.
Right. So when he goes out there and gets picked on and struggles, I'm like, okay, you told the dude he was the man, but
yeah. And Amir Hall looked pretty solid in the playing time that he got yesterday from what I saw. And that's kind of another position. It's similar to center and right tackle and quarterback, where they still appear to be favoring the incumbent starter, the guy they gave the job to coming out of fall camp. And Jair Hill has been picked on quite a bit. He certainly was in the Texas game, and he didn't play all that well yesterday, in my opinion, either. And, they brought in guys like Amir Hall and guys of that type for a reason, and they're just not playing them. It's confusing. And there was another play too that I wanted to bring up. It was pretty early on, if I remember right, and Jaysean Barham had it like a free lane at the quarterback. I don't know if you remember this play.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, yep. I don't know if you can shed any light. I don't know if the announcers were saying anything like that, or if he was doing his job. I saw some people debating whether he was supposed to go straight for the quarterback, and because he had a free lane at the quarterback, and it looked like it was him, and he was going to sack him. And, he kind of diverts off to the right and clips the left tackle, and then kind of goes off into nowhere. So I don't know if you have anything to add on that, but that was just a strange play to me when I saw.
I think that's indicative of what the problem seems to be, which is the instincts, right? And we talked about this kind of on offense with Donovan Edwards thinking he needed to go over here to pick up a blitz that he didn't need to pick up, right?
Yeah.
You go to the line with a play call and with a job on that play, and you try to communicate as much as you can pre-snap. But then when the play begins, you have to be able to react to what's actually happening in the play. And in that situation with Barham, it was his job. That was supposed to be a stunt. So he was supposed to pick that edge player. That was his job. But at that point, you have to realize the edge player is the only one out there. Nobody's picking you up, and you have a free lane to the quarterback.
Yep.
So he was doing his job, but you got it. Yeah, your average fan put it really well. He was supposed to set the pick for the D. In reality, he should have banded it. Yeah.
Yep.
Like, that's what makes a great football player great, or what separates players, right? Is like him thinking like, and again, I wonder how you're being coached, what you're being picked on, like what's in your head where like you don't see quarterback and green light go. You almost hesitate. Oh crap, I have to do this.
Yep.
So what's being picked apart by these coaches when they're watching film and in practice is that like you're not coaching the dude to just go do what he's supposed to do. See, I know people are picking on him, but like he's not like other players. We know he's a good linebacker. I have 2 years of evidence of him being a good linebacker. Some of these guys, it's like Jair Hill, maybe we don't know. I know he's a good linebacker.
Right. And like Kent said in the comments there, he was doing his job. Sure, you can argue he was doing his job, but there's a certain point where you get to a point in football. Huh?
Your job changed on that play.
Right. Yeah. You get to a point when you're playing football where it's got to just be instinctual. If you're a linebacker and you're unblocked and you have a free lane at the quarterback, I don't care if your job is to clip the left tackle and do whatever the coaches are telling you to do on that play. If you have a free lane and the play didn't develop the way you thought it would for whatever reason, it's got to be an instinct to where you attack the quarterback. We've seen this guy run after quarterbacks in the first 2 weeks. He's quick. Jayshon Barham is quick. He's fast, and he's a missile, 6'3", 248. And it's got to get to a point where you just go. You see the lane, and you go. It's like in baseball where you take a secondary lead, and the ball gets by the catcher, and you just go. Like, you know to take that next base. You know to take second base or third base, whatever it is. It's instinctual. And the fact that he's not seeing that hole and just going after the quarterback makes me think that he's kind of overthinking things, or the coaching staff isn't, like you mentioned, maybe not coaching him right. Or he's just thinking. I think he might just be thinking too hard. He's out there kind of thinking more than he is playing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And do you want him to freelance or execute the play? We're not talking about executing a fake punt when the call wasn't on. You know what I mean? The coaches expect him to make that adjustment. There's no way the coaches are watching that film with him and going, hey, I love that you stayed committed to the pick there. I promise you they're saying, hey, I know this call's in, but you got to be able to react here. I'm going to show it for people that don't know. Like, I don't want to say it's egregious, but can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's right here, right? So he comes up to the line. Look, they're communicating now, which is fine. But Stewart is expected to run a stunt and come inside, and Barham's going to pick that tackle to let him. But look, he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
And look, he does it because you see Stewart get the move after, right? But everybody bails to the other direction. And this is 3rd and 15. Stewart's not going to have a better chance of getting to him than he will at that point.
Right.
You know, so again, is it egregious? Do I think he's terrible because of that? No. Again, I understand the logic, but again, it just kind of speaks to there's plays like this last year where Mike Sainer still, I mean, gosh, that's why Mikey Sainer still was so good. You don't know it because he makes the play. You don't know how many times he gave up on his own coverage that he was supposed to be in and instead ran up to the runner. You don't know how many times he did that. Because when he makes the play, on that play, if Barham would have gone straight at the quarterback and gotten the sack, you would have been like, oh, great blitz call. You would have had no idea he didn't do the chip he was supposed to do. You know what I mean? Just like, it is funny. Like, we keep talking about play calling, and I always want to be able to speak to my issues with play calling, because Jim Harbaugh used to have a great line about this where he's like, if the play works, you love the play calling. If it's not successful, then the play calling sucks.
Yep.
Right. Like, so I always try to be like, but yeah, this is a great point too. The QB bailed because he was free.
Yeah.
The only person who didn't realize he was free was him. so that's kind of interesting. But again, I thought him and Houseman, I think both of them led in tackles for this game when they didn't in the previous ones, which is kind of a red flag because the linebackers always lead in tackles. because of the way the Michigan defense works, which is basically your front dominates and then the linebackers come up and get your gap assignment, right? Working on
another rogue commenter.
Yeah.
But yeah, Barham and Hausman both had 7 tackles, and they both led the team in tackles. So overall, I mean, I know we picked apart that play and Barham in particular, but overall as a whole, they played solid. And like I mentioned, the starting defense only gave up 3 points, which is good, right? That's what they should do against Arkansas State.
So there were 0 missed tackles in the run game in this game. Will Johnson had a missed tackle. Jair Hill had a missed tackle. Cody Jones had a missed tackle. Ricky Johnson had 2, all defensive backs.
Yeah.
So that was a big improvement too. It felt like it was cleaner up front. And then I apologize. It was your average fan. Yeah. Win with your front 4. Again, I don't mind disguising coverages and sending Barham on a play and letting Stewart drop back or, some stuff like that. I don't mind that. Even if you're going to have 7 guys up front, when, that's a very wink thing to do, to have the 7 people on the line. You don't know who's coming or going. That's fine. Just leave Graham and Grant where they belong. Leave your edge guys where they belong. You're not fooling anybody by taking your better players out of positions. Right. Again, I don't know what the right term is, in terms of concern, because they had 12 pressures as a team, but no one guy really stepped up big here. So that's something to watch moving forward. I liked that they leaned on the front 4 more, and hopefully that continues and the numbers will come with it. We've hinted at it already a little bit, talking about the Hill and Hall part of it. So, where are you in terms of those 2 guys? And then honestly, Will Johnson kind of got picked on with Fresno. He obviously got the pick 6 at the end. He was trying to get an interception all game. Texas didn't go at him at all. He was the most targeted player in this game, 9 times. He gave up 6 receptions for 54. The one thing you like to see is not a lot of yak, less than 10 yards after catch. He did have a forced incompletion on a pass breakup as well. But where are you in terms of teams picking on Will Johnson and him maybe not always looking like the best corner in football like we expected, and Hill struggling after the hype he got as well? I think Zeke Barrett Nichols has been really, really good.
Yeah.
You're not replacing Mike Zayner still, but he looks like he's been good in his spot. But those outside corners, I think it's fair to say, at least below expectations at this point. Do you blame that on what was happening up front in defense, or is it them too?
Yeah, I'm not really sure, but you're right. I would definitely say they have not lived up to expectations so far this year. Will Johnson, we said this after the first game, and I think it still reigns true. He's looked human. He was unhuman last year. He was unbelievable. And this year, maybe not as much. I don't know what exactly to attribute that to. Like I mentioned earlier, Jair Hill, maybe not looking so great either. Amir Hall hasn't seen a whole lot of playing time, so I don't know.
When I say picking on him, I just mean throwing his way. I didn't mean it like in a negative connotation.
It's a whole lot more than what he was targeted at last year, if I remember right. This is considered picking on him compared to last year. There were times last year he hardly had the ball thrown at him all game, and now this year I think he's had balls caught on him in every game so far this year.
Yeah, it's 2 well, no, he didn't give up a reception last week, but I think he was only targeted once too. So
okay, all right. Well, either way, I don't know exactly what to attribute it to, whether it's the front, whether it's Wink's scheme, Wink's defensive scheme, or whatever it may be. But I do think too that goes into Michigan's 3rd down defense, where we've seen already through 3 games it's not been good. It was awful against Texas, and even on the
brought this up in the comments. Even if they're in man-to-man, they're playing so far off.
Yeah, and even against Arkansas State, we saw on the first drive they had, what was it, 2 3rd down conversions. Both of them were like 3rd and long, right? And I do think that there is a factor. So overall, not very impressed with the defensive back play so far.
Yeah, they gave up a 3rd and 2, 5-yard pass. They gave up a 3rd and 3. No, No, that was where the penalty came up. They had the stop, and then they had the penalty there. So it wasn't the 4 first downs on third or whatever it was against Texas, but I'm not concerned yet because of how good they are. I do still think there's some scheme issues. People bring up, good points with the man. I haven't watched the tape on this one yet. Normally by this point I have, but I don't know. It was more bend don't break in this game, which I'm willing to accept.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing I say, where it's like, even if they're throwing at will, as long as they're not giving up big plays, I don't really care. And I think he's gonna, and the more you throw at him, the more opportunities he has to get an interception, or you get a tip ball that leads to interceptions. We've seen that a ton with Michigan. When Makari Page got that interception that just felt inevitable at that point.
Yeah, it did.
Right. It was building up, like, they're going to get a pick. And then they did. But yeah, so like I said, I'll be interested to see. I think Hall and Hill will probably continue. Hall had 19 snaps in this game compared to Hill's 34. So that was definitely more for Hall. Let's see. Hall targeted 6 times, only gave up 3 receptions for 13 yards. And then Hill 4 for 39. Hall had 2 pass breakups. Hill got a forced incompletion, but not as a breakup. I don't know if that was a tackle or what that was, but I think those guys will probably continue to rotate a little bit. We saw them rotate that CB2 position well into the season last year.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be shocked, but
I'm looking forward to see what they do going forward. We saw last year, Jair Hill, if I remember right, got a lot of run early on before Josh Wallace kind of took over. So it'll be interesting to see if that same scenario replays itself. But you mentioned big plays, and that's something that I think we should give Michigan credit for. This defense is they've done a pretty good job, like you mentioned, of bending, not breaking, not giving up the big play. Through 3 games, really the only big play that I can remember was that end around that they gave up to Texas. That went for 63 yards or something like that, where it went down to the 5-yard line.
Ryan Wingo, yeah.
Yeah. That to be honest, that's really the only one that I can remember off the top of my head. I guess if I'm looking through.
Well, by definition, any run over 10 is a big play, and any pass over 15 is. So, like, they've given those up. But, like, against Arkansas State, for instance, they gave up 1 run for 10 yards.
Yeah.
The run defense was lights out. They gave up 5 passes that were for more than 15. But the longest one was that touchdown pass. When was that? Late in the fourth quarter, halfway through the fourth quarter. So,
yeah.
At that point, I was like, whatever. Right. I am interested a little bit with the safety rotation. I guess I'm not shocked Mangum's not playing, because they kind of told us like he was going to have to come on a little bit. But I thought there would be way more rotation. We saw a lot of Brandon Hillman in this one, which I am super excited about.
Yeah.
I've said all along that he reminds me a lot of Keon Sabb, which I saw people talking about him in the comments as well. Just a reminder, he wanted to play 700 snaps this year. He wasn't going to be anywhere where he was involved in any rotation. He went to Bama. Michigan made an NIL offer that was more than Bama. He took the Keon Coleman route and wanted to, so it's a bummer. Of all the guys that left, he's probably the one I wish was here the most still. Right? NFL draft, obviously. JJ is the answer. JJ changes everything on this team probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a bummer to lose him. But obviously, Makari has looked really good in his role. Quentin Johnson's had his moments, but I don't think he was ever supposed to be the starter. I really like him as a rotational piece.
Yep.
So I'd like to see a Wesley Walker play more, or Brandon Hillman, which, again, the reason he reminded me of Sabb, he likes to hit people.
Mm-hmm.
He's a linebacker playing safety. We saw him play a couple of hits in this game. So, again, so much rotation in some spots and not so much at safety. That's been kind of interesting to me this year. This game, we saw a lot more, but.
Yeah, Hillman was out there early. I noticed him out there pretty early on, and he played quite a few snaps, and it was good to see. Makari Page and Quentin Johnson obviously holding down the fort there, the 2 seniors, but good to see the younger guys getting in there. And obviously, when you build up a lead like that and you get the 3rd and 4th stringers in there at the end of the game, obviously They didn't play up to probably Michigan's standard of defense, but they're getting experience, and I think that's what's important. Giving up a touchdown at the end of an Arkansas State game in September, is that going to be the end of the world? No. And obviously, you probably would have liked to see a larger margin of victory, but getting those guys that experience, building that callus, like the coaches like to say, that's what's important, and I think that'll benefit them going forward.
Yeah, I mean, they had true freshmen. They had Miles Pollard. The poor guy just continues to get cooked when he's on the field. They targeted him twice on that last drive, 35 yards, and I think he gave up the touchdown, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
So again, the depth just isn't what it was, and we knew that coming into this year. So, but I think what's going to be interesting for me is kind of umbrella all of this here. Talked about this back to basics approach. We saw on offense, we saw on defense, more so on defense, I think. My concern is, have you done that and you're going to stick to that and you're willing to add a couple wrinkles as you move forward? Or were you doing that because Arkansas State was a lesser opponent?
Yeah.
And now USC is coming and all of a sudden it's going to look like Texas again, where, and I'm talking about Campbell and Wink at this point here, it feels like it's the smartest man in the room syndrome, or, the overthinking. It reminds me of the TCU game. Well, if they know that we know that they know, then we need to do at some point, just line up and see who's got the better team, right? How do you feel, USC? What is it, 5 points? Is that what it's settled on at this point?
I haven't paid too close attention.
I think it's 5 or 6. It's up to 6.5 in some places. Okay.
I thought I saw it at 6.5 at some point yesterday. I'm not sure what it's at now, but
either way, Michigan was favored coming into the season. Now they're on that side of it, obviously. S&P Plus continues to favor Michigan in this game, for what it's worth, however you feel about that. But how are you feeling coming into this game?
I'm feeling okay. I really don't know what to feel. I think Michigan could win. I also think Michigan could lose. It might be as close to a toss-up as we might see this season. Miller Moss has looked good. I know USC beat LSU in Vegas to open the year, and then LSU obviously had that big-time win against South Carolina.
Yeah, they haven't looked as good, though, so it's interesting.
Yeah, so it's kind of tough to judge USC based on their performance against LSU, but it's going to be a dogfight. It really is, and like you mentioned, you would like to see Michigan just stick with its basics. Not rushing Derek Moore and Josiah Stewart off the same side of the defensive line. I think that would be beneficial for Michigan.
I was so angry watching that Texas game again. I was so angry.
I think obviously it helps Michigan that this game is at the Big House. If it was in LA, I'd be a lot more concerned, and I wouldn't pick Michigan to win. I still probably won't pick Michigan to win, honestly, but yeah, we'll see. If Michigan sticks to its basics and the defense plays how we know it can, I'll be confident. But at this point, like we started the show with, they're no further along in this search for a quarterback than they were 6 months ago. And I think at the end of the day, that's what's going to haunt Michigan in this game. I just don't. They have no quarterback, and that's going to be their demise in this game. I think I'm going to take USC. Probably. I'd probably go. Huh?
Don't worry about score yet.
Okay. All right. I'm taking USC.
I don't know who I'm going to pick yet. Loveland being healthy or not is massive. I do think it's going to be Alex Orji.
Yeah.
Everyone's asking who starts at QB. I do think it's going to be Alex Orji, because you have to worry about losing your team at this point.
Yeah.
And the thing, Harbaugh talked about meritocracy. I said pre-2021 earlier. The 2015 through 21 thing, they talked about meritocracy all the time. And then it was always the more senior players seemed to get the gig. And then even when they were making mistakes, it seemed like the change wasn't happening and the better player wasn't out there. And it was just like, if you're a player on this team and you're trying to earn more reps, you're going to follow the dudes that are balling, right? Like the guys that are playing well. And if your coaches aren't adjusting to that, you can lose a room that way. So I think it's going to be Orji. I think they have an interesting advantage in this game, which is, USC hired Deontay Lynn from UCLA to come coach their defense. They are in literally the infant stages of a defensive scheme that Michigan has been running for 4 years. I think that helps you as a defense. And I think it obviously helps you as an offense, game planning for that defense and going against a similar scheme for the last few years as well. So I do think maybe, they have, an advantage there, if you will. So let's knock out some questions real quick. Is Tuttle ever not hurt? So yeah, people bringing up Tuttle. I'll be frank. I think that is the syndrome I was talking about earlier, which is here's the guy I haven't seen yet. He must be better.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying Tuttle might not be a little bit more improved over a Warren or whoever, but you're talking about a guy who's a 7th-year quarterback. The 1 year he started, he threw 2 touchdowns and 5 picks before getting benched. The 1 year he got to have an open competition, he lost to Connor Bazelak, who was the quarterback at Bowling Green the next year. Right. Jack Tuttle is not saving this team.
Yeah.
And at this point, his injury has lingered to a point where he literally doesn't seem able to be what a starting quarterback has to be, which is practice all week, play in a game on Saturday, and then practice all week again.
Yep.
Right. So even if you throw him out there and he gets a shot and he's really good, if he's not going to stay healthy, then, so I don't know. I like Jack Tuttle a lot. He's a future coach. He'll be a coach on this team next year. Could he be better? Again, I'm back to, I don't know. He's not the answer.
No.
That's,
and just to add to that really quick,
yeah, go ahead.
During warmups, I watched the quarterbacks warm up. I didn't see Jack Tuttle throw one ball. It's not like he was out there throwing here and there, kind of taking maybe half the reps that the other guys were during warmups. No, he didn't take a single rep. All of warmups, he stood there and watched the quarterbacks take snaps from the centers. He watched them, throw to the receivers, things like that. He stood there and watched. And, it's clear he's not 100%. If they were to trot him out there, he still probably wouldn't be 100% next week. And is a let's say 80% Jack Tuttle better than a 100% Davis Warren at this point? Probably not. So, like Trevor said, it's just hopeful that the guy who they haven't put out there yet is going to be better, and I'm not sure he will be.
The Kyle McCord thing has come up a couple times. Anybody who watches this show regularly knows I am a massive Kyle McCord fan. I've said all along, I think Ohio State was wrong to scapegoat him in that game last year. I think they would have been significantly better this year with him in his second year. I'm not surprised he's doing well at Syracuse. That said, he committed to Syracuse in the middle of December. All the hindsight, why can't I think of the word? When you change history, I can't think of the word. Anyway, no quarterback was coming to this program until J.J. McCarthy publicly said he was not coming back and was going to the NFL.
Yep.
This fan base still despises Cade McNamara for announcing he was transferring to Iowa around the Big Ten championship game. He was injured, not playing, and no chance he was starting next year over J.J. McCarthy. Yep. The window opened at the end of the regular season. They were not getting a quarterback in the winter portal window. It just was not going to happen, because if J.J. McCarthy had come out around the Big Ten championship game and said, hey, just so you guys know, I'm going to the NFL, this place would have lost its mind, rightfully. Yeah. You're not focused on the Rose Bowl and the Natty. What are you doing? Right? Yeah. That's why they're talking about changing this winter window, because playoff teams were punished. Had he been a senior and you knew he was leaving anyway, right? You might have been able to do something there. That's why they got Barham, right? I'm sure they told, Colson's a guy that knew he was probably going. It wasn't public. He knew at least Michael Barrett was leaving, and they wanted to play him at the will spot anyway. That's how they got Jay Sean Barham. They knew Keegan and Zinter were leaving. That's how they got Josh Preed. Those were the only two guys they got in the winter window. in the spring window, there was no quarterback out there that elevates this quarterback room. Right. And people will say, oh, why didn't they tamper? Why? They did. I promise you they did. Some guys didn't enter the portal. One guy stayed in the NFL draft, which I wonder if he wishes he had now. I'm not going to say the name, whatever. They did these things, right? They were just in a difficult spot, right? So revisionist history, that's what I was looking for. Everyone knew Jim and JJ were gone. No, they didn't. Like we forget about the hourly updates when the season ended with the back and forth in the Chargers, and the Chargers had moved on and blah, 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 blah. The decision wasn't made. When they won the Natty, I think it was more obvious. But again, at that point, you're not getting anyone to commit. Who's going to get Moore doesn't even know he's going to be the head coach at that point.
Yep.
Right. And the same thing kind of happens with some of the coaching stuff too. Like, I'll wait till the season ends before we really go, but it does feel like maybe on the offensive side, you know what he's lacking? Himself. Jim Harbaugh had another head coach in Sherrone Moore.
Yep.
He said that all the time. And we've talked about how Harbaugh would leave the program for the entire spring and summer or whatever to go to California, and Moore basically ran the show, right? He doesn't have that head coach. So when you promote Kirk and you promote Grant and you keep Bellamy, you've just literally promoted everybody one spot. There's not any experience in that group. I wonder if give Kirk co-OC title, but bringing in an experienced OC, right? And on the defensive side of the ball, they thought for sure they were getting one of those 3 Ravens guys. Every one of them got an NFL job. The 3 Ravens coaches they thought they could get as a defensive coordinator, or if you want to count Lynn, he had got the USC job before anything had even changed here. But all 3 of them got NFL jobs. It was wild. And then its defensive line coach gets fired the week of spring camp. Just wild. Absolutely wild. Loveland, again, we have not heard anything yet, which for now, I'm going to say no news is good news. To Brock's point, he was on the sideline, not wearing a sling or anything. If there was a shoulder injury, you'd think they would have at least had the arm elevated. So, but we will definitely have updates on that as soon as we hear anything. Because, I mean, that Brock, you already said it, man. If you lose Loveland,
yeah,
that's your best player on offense, and you're struggling on offense. Blech. Don't even want to think about that. So, but yeah, anyway, all that said, with the USC game, I do have a little bit of optimism because I like the direction they went this week. The quarterback's such a question mark, and it's so dumb. So dumb that here we sit having it again. Why didn't they play Orji more after they said they were going to?
Yeah, that's something that confuses me too. Sherrone Moore said on Inside Michigan Football after week 1 that Alex Orji's role was going to grow and grow, every week. I think he played 9 snaps, I think in week 1, if I remember right. And then he didn't play that many. He didn't play any
against Texas, something like that.
Yeah, it was not a lot against Texas. And then I guess yesterday's game it did technically, but that was not just like the Alex Orji package growing. That was Alex Orji is now the starter. It wasn't just him rotating in there and that role developing and growing. No, that was Davis Warren's not cutting it, turning the ball over. Here comes Alex Orji. You're the starter.
Well, and it's funny because that first touchdown drive where Orji comes in the red zone and gets the touchdown, first game of the year against Fresno. I'm like, okay, if you're going to actually do the Leak Tebow thing, where it's a true 2 quarterback system and you're using it situationally, I'm a little bit more intrigued. But then it was just randomly throwing him out there, or like, derp, here's, 3rd down, go out there, Orji, in an empty set. What are you doing, man? Just crazy. The Moore thing, again, I hate people turning on Moore already. I think that's crazy. I think there's 2 reasons. One, if you think this team is bad now, if Sherrone Moore had not been promoted, Mason Graham's not here, Will Johnson's not here, Colson Loveland's not here, Kenneth Grant's not here, I could go on and on. There's a lot of people not here. Recruiting wise, they added 4 top 100 recruits for the first time in however many years. Like, give them a chance. right? Like that part, yeah. And I don't know who they would have gone to in that situation otherwise. Like I know people think they could have gone after DeBoer. I don't know. And a lot of people who don't like the more hire love Jim Harbaugh. Sherrone Moore was handpicked by Jim Harbaugh, man.
Yep.
You know,
And the players wanted him too.
Yeah. And it's such a tricky situation too, because most new head coaches have an opportunity to bring some of their own people with them. All of Moore's people, not all of them, but a lot of them were here already. And yes, head coaches bring a lot of their staff with them when they go to new places. What Jim Harbaugh did is not that different. What changed though was Jim missed on a lot of guys. Elston and Klink were never in the conversation initially, right? Yep. It was like as soon as Jim missed on somebody, he came back. And then Herbert was a guy that was like, well, that doesn't really make sense. There's not a position. So it was like extra rating at that point. And again, it was late in the year too. So a lot of the guys they would have targeted, there were some big names out there that were like, I can't leave now. You know, so he was put in a tough spot with that. But again, at the end of the year, I think we can give that the full criticism it deserves. But that's a weird thing. Do you think Texas is the beast of the team they are made out to be with all the mistakes?
Texas is good.
Texas is legit.
They're the
number one team in the country. Yeah.
Yeah. That's not just some, anomaly or some outlier where Michigan just didn't play well. No, they got beat by a better team and a team that's going to compete for a national championship this year.
I said this after last week's game too. They remind me a lot of Michigan last year.
Yep.
They've got a quarterback. Ewers sounds like he's going to be back maybe after only a week or two. Oh my God, how good is Arch Manning? It's unbelievable to me that like all but 3 teams in this country could probably be better with Arch Manning as their quarterback.
Yep.
Like,
he's
and
amazing.
That's your backup. It's unbelievable. But their quarterback's gone to a next level. Their offensive line, I didn't give them enough credit. The amount of starts they have, the cohesion they have, they're probably going to win the Joe Moore Award. That offensive line is legit. They might not have the explosiveness that like A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy gave them on the deep balls, but they've got good, sound receivers, and they do have speed there. Like Ryan Wingo is probably going to continue to come along as the year goes on, right?
Yep.
Their defensive front, again, maybe this reminds me more of 2022 Michigan. There hasn't been one guy that's really jumped out yet. Trey Moore, their transfer, looked good. Ethan Burke, who was a one-time Michigan commit, could be really good. But they've got 8 to 10 dudes up front that they're rotating that are doing the job, and their linebackers are legit, and their secondary is taking a huge leap at this point. So I've been on Georgia from the start, was kind of my powerhouse, and Texas was kind of there close with them. I mean, Georgia struggles with Kentucky. I don't know. Those are the 2 clear best teams to me, and the Tennessee's on a crazy level this year, and Ohio State's obviously still out there as well. It feels like it might be a bad year for the 12-team playoff, though. I think there's a pretty big gap from the top tier and the rest, but we'll see. Maybe some upsets will come, and that'll be fun. Yeah, Kentucky's not a bad team. I don't mean that as a shot, but you would have expected Georgia to handle them a little bit easier than that. Yeah. All right. I think that's enough. We've already been here almost an hour and a half. So anyway, stock reports will continue to come out this week. Some other premium content, michigan.rivals.com. If you're not a subscriber already, make sure you get over there. Josh will have intel. This will be a good week for intel because we're going to have to dig into, we've got injuries now with Loveland, and obviously the QB conversation is going to be wild. So we'll have content all week, comments from players, comments from coaches, things we're hearing, rumors and such shared. Yeah. And then we're getting close to basketball too. Can you believe it?
We are.
We're gonna start covering basketball soon. So if they get blown out by USC, then it's basketball season, folks.
Yep.
Anyway, we will be back next week, as always, Sunday at 7. Hail to the podcast. If you're listening back, we appreciate it. If you want to be live and part of the conversation, like so many folks have been this entire show, again, thank you guys so much for coming in and contributing, being a part of the show and sticking around. It means a ton. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, notification bell on YouTube so you do know when we go live. Hail to the podcast, our post-game show with Dennis, and then his weekly show, Good Afternoon Michigan Football. We've got tons of coverage, video form, and of course, like I said, over at michigan.rivals.com. But until then, we'll be back next week talking, hopefully, a Michigan victory over USC or another, oh God, what's next conversation. Make sure you're here with us. Hail to the podcast.